We are in the book of 1 Peter. We are beginning the third chapter here this evening. 1 Peter chapter 3. Of course, Peter's talking about the foreknowledge, God's foreknowledge of the suffering of the saints and the salvation of the saints. He's saying through the hardships in this world, set your mind on, or minds on the hope that is set before you. And last week, starting in verse 11 of chapter 2, we see that in chapter 11 and 12, he says, conduct yourself in such a way that when the Gentiles, or the ungodly is what he's referring to, have contact with you, that they will see your good deeds and turn to God. And so he's addressing this idea that we are to conduct ourselves in such a way that we're to be different, right? In fact, Peter deals with that very concept himself, doesn't he? That we're to be what kind of people? Peculiar. Some of us have that part down pat, right? Yeah, but not just peculiar. We are to be, as we're going to look at Sunday morning, Lord willing, in the Sermon on the Mount, we're to be the salt of the earth. We are to be the light on top, or the city on top of a hill. We're to let our light shine that men may see them and glorify our Father which is in heaven. And that's what he's talking about. How do we do that? Well, he starts by talking about probably the most difficult relationship that I can even imagine, and that's one of slavery. And we talked about last week the fact that Christianity is largely responsible for the abolishment of slavery, not through direct force, but through principles. And can you imagine, and oftentimes Scripture is criticized for not condemning slavery. But we looked at last week at the fact that about 50% of the known world's population were slaves at that time. If they had revolted, even had they won, it would have had a very short-term impact on the equation, right? But we, through Christianity, are giving ways of impacting culture, impacting and influencing people around us, that, as Jesus said, is our goal, to draw people to our Heavenly Father. And so, in short, his advice to slaves was what? Obey your master. Be the best slave you can be. But what about when you're mistreated? Obey your master. Yep. Now, I want to be clear, as we get into chapter 3, we're going to talk about wives and then husbands. The connection here is it's relationships, right? The difficult relationships of life. And I don't mean to put marriage up there as, I'm not picking on marriage when I say that, but the concept of righteousness, as we address Sunday morning, is having a right relationship. So if we do righteousness, or if we are righteous, that means that we will be wholesome in our relationship with God, that we'll be wholesome in our relationship with our spouse, with our business partners, with our children, right? That's what Peter's saying. You want to change the world? Start at home, right? Be the best citizen, be the best servant or employee, be the best wife, be the best husband that you can possibly be, the most Christ-like when I say best. Questions or comments? Would someone then read 1 through 6 of 1 Peter chapter 3, please?
Be in subjection to your own husbands, that they obey not the word, they also maybe without the word be won by the conversation of the wives, while they behold your chaste conversation coupled with fear, whose adorning yet it not be that outward adorning of plaiting the hair and wearing of gold, or putting on of apparel, but let it be the hidden man of the heart, in that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of God of great price. For after this manner, in the old times, your holy women also, who trusted in God, adorned themselves, being in subjection unto their own husband, even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughter ye are, as long as ye do well, and are not afraid with any amazement. Okay, thank you.
The question is, my husband is not a believer. What do I do? Show him. Yep. Absolutely. Give the word, right? So when, verse 2, when they see your respect and pure conduct, do not let, they'll turn. And he goes on to say, your appearance, your beauty, isn't to be outward. Now, does that mean it's sinful for women to look beautiful? Rita's saying, I hope not. That's not their focus. It's not that beauty is wrong. He's saying your true beauty is to be in your conduct from within. One of the Proverbs says, as a gold ring in the snout of a pig, so is a beautiful woman without discretion. I thought of that a couple weeks ago. Last time Amanda and I went skiing, there was a fist fight. And I saw this guy in ski patrol yelling at each other, being nebby as I am. I followed them. Anna was skiing with me, and they ended up at ski lift, and I was leaning on my poles watching. And next thing I knew, the ski patrol jacked a kid in the mouth. And not that he didn't deserve it, but it was wrong. And it broke into a full-blown brawl, and everyone else ran away. I'm not that smart, so I kicked my skis off, and I ran in and got them separated. And more ski patrol were showing up, but they were all, I think, to be in ski patrol, you have to be over 70 years old. And so, Kevin, they just kept standing back, letting me deal with it. And we got them separated. I got ski patrol calmed down. And the kid was over talking to like a group of 4 or 5 ski patrol. And he was upset because they were trying to make him leave, and the cops weren't there yet. And he felt unjustly punched, which he was. And so he says, well, watch this then. And before I knew it, he ran past me because I thought it was over. And the ski patrol guy's been over picking up skis. He jumps on his back, takes him to the ground. So I go over, I separate them again. The kid runs, he's going to go on the ski lift and leave, and all the ski patrol's yelling, don't let him on the ski lift. So I got in front of him. He had a snowboard on, so I don't know. They run like aliens when they have that. They're not real fast running. So I got in front of him. I'm stopping. Here's where this all ties in. He said, get out of my way. And didn't say it that politely. And I told him, I said, let's calm down here. There's a lot of ways this can go, but none of them end with you getting on that ski lift, on the lift. So let's just calm down. Security's on its way. Let's talk to them, let them know what happened. He's yelling at me, but the whole time he's yelling, he's in my face screaming, and he's got this nose ring in with loops, and it's dangling down. And I thought, well, this goes bad. I can just grab that and say, sit, and do whatever. But that's why we put nose rings in. You're not thinking about getting one of those, are you, Kyle? Okay. That's why you put... You're not thinking about it. But that's why you put them in animals, right? For control. And the point that the proverb writer is making is that you wouldn't put a gold ring in a pig's nose. Sometimes we put things like that in our noses now, but you wouldn't put that in a pig's nose. And the same is beauty without discernment, beauty without wisdom. A lot of times we try and beat our spouses into submission, right? Not just wives, but wives included. I mean that figuratively. But we try that with other people, don't we? Wear them down, tell them how wrong they are. Attack, attack, attack. Peter's saying, live in submission with a calm spirit, the way a holy, verse 5, holy woman ought to act and adorn herself. And hopefully that has an impact on them. It's had an impact on the world. So it's the greatest way you can have an impact on your husband. Emily.
Louise fished for me one time before I had become a Christian. She didn't harp at him about it. She left tracts and bulletin and any kind of literature laying around. And he would read it.
Yep.
And that she didn't try to force him. And eventually he became a Christian.
Yep. I've used Louise as an example many times when I've had many wives ask me this question. There's a problem in our human mind with this kind of approach, isn't there? You got it. And it's out of our control. So the husband may very well never obey the gospel. Your master, if we go back, to the previous example, may never set you free. I want to know what I can do to make you do what I think you ought to do. That's not God, is it? That's not the God who marched to the cross and died, right? He'd approached it differently. So, in short, wives, be subject to your husbands. Focus on your inner beauty, which has to do with the imperishable. There's that term that we've seen. That's in verse 4, the imperishable beauty. Remember how many times in chapter 1 that term was used to pertain to the riches of God? Questions or comments? All right, husbands, now it's your turn. Would someone read 7 and, I guess just 7 for us?
Vessel, as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered.
Okay, thank you. Husbands, live with your wives with understanding. As best I can tell, the concept there is with empathy, right? Patience would be involved with that. we just talked about wives being subject to their husbands. So obviously, we're going to talk about how the husband should roll over his wife, right? No, it's the exact opposite, isn't it? Live with understanding and show what? Patience, that is true. Honor. Live with patience and show honor. That is something that I think our cultures went completely reverse on, isn't it? The godly woman is a place of prestige, a place of honor that should be shown a great deal of respect. And not that she is to be lorded over. Now we're going to get to this weaker vessel. What does that mean? Bob, you're not allowed to answer this. For a second, so I thought I was going to sneeze. What does it mean, showing her honor as the weaker vessel? Not as smart. Is that what you said? Yeah, not as strong. The reason I said that, I've heard several people suggest that means not as smart, right? It's not at all what we're talking about here. They're usually smarter, yeah. And, Paul does go back to the beginning at the fall, and the woman was deceived. And some use that as an argument to say, well, the man was smart enough, he wouldn't have been deceived. Is that really smarter, that the man knew he ought not do it? Knew it was a bad decision and still did it? That's a way worse decision, isn't it? By the way, Kyle, you came up in the podcast today, the last podcast of the season. We're in Mark 16. So I wasn't the one that originally brought it up, but you came up in it. Not by name, but you came up in it. Now, we all make mistakes, right? Can you imagine knowing how it's going to end up and still doing it? Would we say that's better, Kyle? If you knew you were going to get bit and you still did it, would you say, well, that was a way better decision? It wouldn't be a better decision, would it? No. So the point here is that this is not about mental capacity whatsoever. It's about physical labor. Putting in context of the historical context, we have trouble sometimes of moving out of what we know today. Women are able to make a living every bit as well as men, right? Most jobs that exist today are well suited for women as well as men. Bob made the point earlier, a lot of times better, right? Was that the case before the Industrial Revolution? No. The types of labor were not the same. And so she's to be looked after. She's to be honored. And I believe that's the context that we have here. Questions or comments on that? Yes?
emotional too, that women are more emotional, they could be swayed by a tender heart or easier than a man?
I think it's true. I'm thinking through whether that would mean weaker, though. I tend to think of that as different, because that same emotional response, which, by the way, there's not a huge difference between the genders, but there is a difference, right? Is also an asset, isn't it? So it's possible, but I'm not sure in my mind if that what fits into weaker. Great, though, Rita, great idea of bringing up here that our roles and our strengths and weaknesses are well suited for each other. Amanda and I once took personality tests, and we found that we are very incompatible. True story. I paid money to find that out. That's why I knew when we went there. But the reason is we're very alike, right? We're both extroverts, although I'm much more, obviously, right? But we were so similar in areas that personality types weren't the most compatible, right? So point being, there are differences of the gender roles help one another. I think that's maybe something you brought out. Since they are heirs with you, some manuscripts say co-heirs. What does the Bible say about male and female as far as it pertains to salvation? Same. There's neither male nor female, slave or free, right? Or as you're saying, Mike, co-heir, they're the same. Not in a convoluted way that much or some of our culture is trying to say today, right? It's saying that you're equals. Don't forget that. I think the underlying concept is, Christian men, just because you can beat your wife in arm wrestling match, or at this time where there was much, much, much less protection because you can beat her, physically beat her, doesn't mean that you're not equals. Right? Treat her like an equal, but honor her more. Of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. Wow. That's significant, isn't it? Significant. Think about the way women were treated at this time, and then impose Christian principles to those relationships, and think about how drastically that would change the woman's standing. Right? Sharon.
Makes things worse for women, but if you really think about this, it does just the opposite because of how things were then. Women were nothing, really, like possessions.
Yes.
And if you put these principles into action, that would have lifted them up a lot.
Yep, absolutely. I'll leave with one last thought here, and you can decide how relevant it is. But Jordan Peterson comments on the fact that there's a lot of talk today about equality. And he oftentimes in debates or in interviews will ask this question, what areas of equality do we want to focus on? Males are incarcerated at, he has exact numbers, and tremendously higher rate than females. Males die significantly sooner. Males are much more likely to suffer self-harm from their careers. He goes down through, some of these things. He said, what points do we want complete equality in? And he's not, in my estimation, he's not making the case against equality. I think he's pointing out what I tried to point out earlier, and I think what the Bible really does is encourage us to roles that help and build up one another versus being in a competitive situation or relationship. Question, Emily?
What about the virtuous woman?
Of Proverbs 31.
Yeah, did she live in this time frame?
Yeah, she would have lived prior to this. And I think the virtuous woman is an unattainable ideal, much like Jesus Christ is an unattainable ideal for all of us. No one could. No one could, and that's part of the point.
So she wasn't real, is that what you're saying?
Yes, I do not believe she was an actual woman. She's an ideal woman. And I've had ladies say, I can't live up. I read that and I'm discouraged. That's not the purpose, right? But we also see that she doesn't fit anywhere near that Leave It to Beaver stereotype that we had just a few years ago, neither, right? You know what I mean, right, Kevin? So, yeah, the model family. Although, and my point was there that sometimes here in, the church, that women are not to work outside of the house, and a lot of these things that are. The virtuous woman in Proverbs 31 does not meet that criteria at all. Oops. Yeah. In and out of the house. Yep. All right. Then let's go ahead and look at verses 8 through 12, if someone would read those for us.
Finally, being all one mind, having compassion one of another, love as brethren, be pitiful, be courteous, not rendering evil for evil or railing for railing, but contrariwise blessing, knowing that ye are thereunto called, that ye should inherit a blessing. For he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil, and his lips that they speak no guile. Let him eschew evil and do good. Let him seek peace and ensue it. For the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open unto their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against them that do evil.
Okay, so we'll start in verse 8, obviously, where it uses that word finally, kind of like preachers do. We say that word and everyone gets excited, but he goes on for quite some time after that. But he's bringing this idea of our relationships up, right? He's summarizing it, and he's bringing it together. Have unity of mind. Mike, did you read King James, same mind, have the same mind? Is that how that read? Yeah, verse 8. Of one mind. Okay, couldn't remember the exact phraseology there. Have unity of mind, or be of one mind. What mind is he talking about? Mind of Christ. Yeah. So that means that we're united to be like Christ, right? The slave's approach is different than the master's approach. The wife's approach is different than the husband's approach. We're the same mind in that this is our goal. Oftentimes think that, if we took that approach and we had patience with one another, when we have scriptural disagreements, we'd be so much more likely to get closer to the truth and an agreement if we took that approach. Instead of, you're wrong, we said, well, I'm trying to get as close to Christ, and we both work on that, right? That's what he's saying in our relationships. If our marriage is to be everything it can be, it's going to get there because we both are trying to imitate Christ. That's our mindset. That's our goal. Is Paul wrote to the Philippians, right? Let this mind be in you. Got 15% battery, Dad. So okay. Let this mind be in you that's in Christ, or have unity of mind. What does that look like? Sympathy. Mike, did King James read pity? Pitiful. Pitiful. Today, pity has a negative connotation to it, doesn't it? ESV uses the word sympathy here. I've got better at this with age. I've got a long ways to go. An example, this summer we were at Heiner Park for a podcast, and Jan and Amanda were with us, and there's a statue. The base of it's about this tall, and then it has a CCC worker in it on top. So he's probably like 9 feet tall total, but the base stands about 5 feet tall. And he's a sculptured guy. He's got a sledge in one hand and pick in the other. He's without a shirt. And so I told Amanda, I said, hey, get up on there and I'll get your picture. So I boosted her up on. She put her arm around the statue. I took a picture of her. I have it on my phone, which I don't have with me tonight. And when she was hopping down, I turned around. There was a gentleman that I assumed was Japanese sitting on the bench there. And I made a comment to him, and he just scowled at me. And as we're walking away, I said to John, John, I don't think that gentleman appreciate our sense of humor. And how often do we make little judgmental assumptions about people like that? John's pretty good for me to be out in public because he's good at gently swatting my fingers or wrist about that. He says, well, Mike, I would just assume he doesn't speak English very well and had no idea what was going on. Yeah, that'd be a whole lot more Christ-like way of looking at it, right? Sympathy. How often do we see someone do something and we have that negative, judgmental approach towards them? Sympathy. It's a different way. It's a more Christ-like way. Imagine if Christ looked down at heaven on us like that. I know I'd be in trouble, right? Brotherly love. He dealt with that a lot prior, and we're in Romans 12, which is dealing a lot with brotherly love, where you put someone else above you, right? Where you help people. A tender heart. It's interesting. One of the reasons that runners are more prone to die from heart attacks, not more prone to having heart attacks, but more prone to dying if they have a heart attack, is because their heart muscle is rigid, right? It's fit, and it's not soft. A tender heart. How often are we touched by other people's problems or shortcomings? I try, like I said, I do it better than I used to, but not near as good as I should. I try to see people's challenges versus their faults, because those faults are always covering a challenge, always. tender heart, being touched by their difficulties. A humble mind, a tender heart and a humble mind. Boy, you master those two things and you'll have something, right? Again, Romans 12, where we're dealing with that, where I think it's the end of 13. Do not be wise in your own estimation. Right? A humble heart. In other words, I'm not saying I'd do so much better if I were in their shoes. Right? I could do that better. It's a humble heart. Wrapping that up then, do not repay evil for evil, revile for reviling, but on the contrary, bless. To this you were called, that you may obtain a blessing. Be Christ-like no matter what the situation is. And then Psalm 34, 12 through 14 is what's quoted there. And he says, remember, those are the people who God's going to look kindly on. Questions or comments? I missed saying hello to Tom and Tina early. It's good to have you guys with us online. Thank you.